I believe that there is an issue that is facing humanity, that the largest issue facing humanity, even though the following issues are incredibly terrible and need to be addressed and removed from humanity as soon as possible. This is worse than racism, sexism, bigotry, and it's the root issue that feeds each of these, as well as many other bad behaviors, and that's the ego war, which I'll unpack later. The largest issue is humanity's inability to have healthy conversations about complex topics in the pursuit of truth without ego getting in the way. And the things that all need to be unpacked and understood here are control over decisions and the list of these decisions, of what gets talked about, financial decisions. I'm not going to write all this out right now, but oh my gosh, my mouse won't go over there. So control over decisions inside of a family, couple, government, company, etc. And all of these different places inside of our lives that we just take one person and we look at them and throughout their lives that of right now, instead of their interpersonal relationships at the company that they work at, if they have a job, which most people do, or at their school, all of these different social interactions of how people are treated or how much money they make or how they're valued. There is a great deal of different decisions that are being made, of what gets done and what we can talk about, who gets to have an opinion, whose opinion is right and wrong, and how we even are supposed to go through any of that. There's a lot of complexity here that in our ability to be able to have healthy conversations about complex topics, which my view is that every topic we discuss is really complicated. The issue we're dealing with right now with the coronavirus, I believe, is incredibly complicated in understanding epidemiology, that then unpacks all the different microbes and viruses and bacteria that cause illnesses and disease and strife for humanity. Why we will even want to understand that complicated thing, why any human being in the history of time has ever wanted to put forth any effort in understanding that particular topic, and all of the incredible huge efforts in arguing and debating and trying to understand what that is and how it works, from and I don't know all the list of the jobs. I only know like microbiologists and epidemiologists, and that's about it. And I'm sure there's more specific niche things, jobs and specific fields of study within inside of this that breaks down. And it's just wild, like over the history of time, developing the microscope and coming up with the first vaccine, coming up with the first antibiotic. This topic here is so complicated, and how much it affects all of us, as we can see just within inside of one virus. I don't even know the number. I'd have to go Google it to try and understand how many viruses there are and how often these get created and when the next pandemic or problem will occur. But and even within inside of each of me saying any one of those things, if we had 20 people listening, they can all just give their feedback on any of that. They're like, well, actually, I think it's like this, and this is where we get into not being able to have healthy conversations, because not everyone does get to do that. We don't get it. Everyone doesn't get to just say all the different things that they think about a particular thing, and then we all figure out how we engage in any of those or all of them, to ensure not because everyone needs a voice, but also very much because nothing is above scrutiny. And that when we disallow certain groups of people or individuals inside of all of these different places inside of our lives, our family units, company, government, etc., we're constantly displaying a huge list of bad behaviors that are not allowing that are disallowing us from being able to be intellectually honest, knowing how to be intellectually honest, knowing how to ensure that. I think even here people sincerely believe that in many different ways they are open-minded, but because they think they're open-minded and it's that simple, and they know of ways that they are open-minded, and they can illustrate those, and they can show that that's true, that that's the behavior and those are the views that they have. They are open-minded but where we lack even on this is, as soon as we see the other person as an enemy, one of the incredibly core mechanisms of the ego war is we're in that argument now, not in the pursuit of truth, but in the pursuit of proving the other side wrong. And the more we see them as an enemy, the more we dehumanize them, and the greater we will go to lengths to prove them wrong. And to also then, and that's where we start to see people not even being able to admit that the other person is right or does good things or does great things. And this is, we can very specifically see this with inside of the topic of coronavirus, of how we can talk about the rest of the world and many other nations. Let's focus on America for right now. How Republicans versus Democrats versus Donald Trump, even here we can specifically see that neither side is able to admit and acknowledge and want to have a good principled desire to acknowledge, knowing that they should always be accurate and specific, and acknowledge when the other people are doing good, great, and amazing or decent things. Whether their logic, their behavior, their actions, any of these things fall within the camp of the side of good, and there's a spectrum here. It isn't just good or bad. It's, like I just said, decent, and there's a scale here of probably like 6 different words we can use to describe the level of intensity of the logical reasoning, the understanding of something, or their behavior, their actions, of how they treat their family members or the general public, or how Democrats treat each other or Republicans. Any of these behaviors we see, we are all judging these things, and that's even when we get down to judgment and how complicated that is. But of the core root mechanisms of the core mechanisms of how the ego war works is the root problem that is not allowing us to be able to have healthy conversations about complicated topics. And I just described one of them, but there's, like I said, a huge list of these that disallows us from being able to desire to be intellectually honest. And again, here this is a scale. How much we desire to be intellectually honest versus also how much we see the other person as an enemy, and their ideas are horrible and despicable and laughable, and then they also display irrational behavior or really bad behavior, like they just start yelling or screaming or they start snapping, and we laugh and mock them, and we want to do that. And that is also one of the other many terrible behaviors that we are doing inside of our society when we are mocking our enemies. I actually believe we should never do it. I sincerely believe we should never do it, as well as we shouldn't view people as enemies. That if Hitler actually existed right now, we shouldn't view him as a horrible enemy. But it's not that we're not going to downplay at all any of his insanely terrible, horrific behaviors and his views. We identify and scrutinize all of them, but viewing him as an enemy. And the reason I'm using him is because he's probably one of the worst ones in the most recent history. Though people think Donald Trump is quite near there, but I'm not going to go off on that tangent right now. When we go into conversations and we view the other person as an enemy in this respect, so let's pull it back just a little bit. Let's just go to somebody that we know is actually racist. Let's say a member of the KKK that exists right now today in 2020. There is this wonderful man named Daryl, I forgot his last name right now, Daryl Davis, that went to the Deep South and is a jazz musician and was playing music and converted over 200 KKK members from being KKK. If we go into conversations with anybody we view as an enemy, even if it's a very mild thing, like it's two sisters fighting over a toy or fighting over attention for their parents, and they view the other person's need as a threat to them getting what they want, when they two sisters see themselves each other as an enemy there in that instance, and it's mild, it still needs to be well understood, and it's still bad. We need to talk about it. And then we go to this other side of like a really extreme level of this case, where it's racism or human trafficking or incredible murder or rape, really, really terrible behaviors. When we view these people as horrible, despicable people, and it's not that we downplay, again, we never are going to downplay anyone's behavior. We need to be very specific about the level of intensity of the behavior that they're displaying. If we do not understand, I sincerely believe, and this is one of the things I have in here, where is it? Every poor, bad, horrible, and there's probably more than 3 categories here of the spectrum of levels of intensity of displaying negative behavior. We see makes perfect sense when we understand the root mechanisms of human behavior, all motivations, emotions, nuanced, specific understandings of these things. As we see the accumulation of the good and bad variables in one person's lives and the stresses and responsibilities, but there's so much more here. As we see throughout a person's lifetime, as they were treated and the views that the people around them, so their parents, their siblings, their friends, how they were treated and how they were talked of what is right and what is wrong, and as they have base human needs, and how worse the ego war has gotten, making our ability to be able to understand each other, and this incredible ego of where everything is more important. All of my stuff are more important than yours, and this is where list of ego war. My time, desires, needs, views, etc. So we can see this we just pick any television show, any reality TV show, a scripted show from a TV show from the 90s to now to the 70s. We look at as much online interactions of people, like conversation with Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump, and Chuck Schumer. They've had conversations before in person. Oh man, when our high level officials have such a very terrible way of being able to have conversations, and the average person is also this. And I think there's a lot of data that shows this, and I think we'll see a lot of this also once we go through and we're able to look at as much human interaction as possible to be able to see. We'll see what's happening here. We'll see that we'll start being able to identify what is disconnecting us, that of a person that is displaying any of this. It's because it's learned behavior and they're suffering from a great lack or a lack of their base human needs being met, and this is where we need to start listing the social base human needs. And it's not just to be loved, though it is love, but we need to unpack that. It's desires to be understood in so many ways, of our accomplishments, our struggles, our views, our fluctuations of behaviors, and this is where we start to break down in our side of our society, where because human behavior, I sincerely believe, is really complicated, and most people, and I actually believe this is also true of most therapists. Not that everyone. I'm just going to continue on my path of train of thought. That because human behavior is so complicated, as we see our sister, our brother, our parents, our friends doing different things, we think we definitely understand why that's happening. And then as our level of ego is so high, as it increases and decreases for different reasons, but I think overall, ego in the mass populace of America has very specifically been increasing over the last 20 years. 30 years, sorry. And because of that, when somebody learns what's right and what's wrong and how they think they feel inside of a situation, and this is where we get to see this inside of all of these different television shows or any of these different places, we get to see human behavior, human beings interacting. We can see as they fight and bicker and go back and forth that they are all not allowing each other to have a voice, as they are all bad at understanding the topic at hand. They're all making good points. They're also all always wrong also on every single thing, because every topic that even they're trying to discuss and understand, whatever it is, whether it's the keto diet and whether or not that's healthy, or veganism, or vaccines, or how the financial system works, or how why you got fired from your job, or why, how bad or good of a parent that you are. All of these different things, all of these different views that a person has. When our ego continually increases, the reason, and I like to use Donald Trump as an example for this, is Donald Trump going to hear you if you have a difference of opinion on how human behavior works? So he really thinks, which I think he really thinks this with everything, because he has a lot of ego and it takes a lot for him to change his mind. Like a lot of people really telling him, hey, look, and I think that's what happened with this coronavirus. And that's why he went from acting like it was nothing and it was going to go away to, holy shit, this is going to be the hardest time probably in history. And we're dealing with a lot of unprecedented factors. I don't think he arrived at those conclusions on his own. I don't think that at all. But because he has so much ego, being able to hear that any of his views are wrong, we can even see here on both sides, that Democrats versus Republican, that both of them think that the other person is incredibly, terribly wrong, and they both lack the ability to fully and intellectually honestly engage in any and all of the claims that both of them are making. And because of that, they're frustrating each other. And because of that, this is one of the biggest things. Oh my gosh, I'm so bad. Does it have it yet? So because conversations inside of all these different places inside of our lives, our work, school, couple relationships, marriage, friends, nation, our different sub-communities of, just all the different places that human beings interact, that because we continually see conversations do not yield a cooperative decision making, that somebody has a great deal of ego and is using a great deal of their dominance and control to assert themselves into the powerful position to be able to rule over and talk over and show that, again, their time, their desires, their needs, and their views are more important than others. This is a really terrible thing that we are doing inside of our society that is ripping us apart at all of these different levels, that I sincerely believe is why we're seeing incredible rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, stress, addiction, homelessness, suicide. It's crazy. I'll, it's crazy what these numbers are. There's more and more documentaries coming out on each of these things showing how bad it is and how bad it's been getting. And I believe that the reason it's been getting that way is because of it, is because of this. Is because of the ego war. The ego war is making it to where we cannot talk about racism, sexism, or bigotry. We can't understand it really well because everyone that has inside of those conversations are all making good, great, valid points. Some things are really are close to true or are true, but we need to have conversations on what is true and how that works, like how we establish a true thing. And I think everyone thinks they understand what that means and how that works. That's where the whole ego thing comes into play again, where no, I know my worldview is correct. I know it's true. I know it's absolutely true. In fact, I know a friend who constantly talks like this. He actually thinks that he says there are things that are truisms. These are irrefutable. And I'm like, dude, do you not see exactly what you're doing right there? As you present these things, you get to just say them. I don't get to question them, and no one else does, because you're saying these things are just true. They're irrefutable. Don't question them. Don't scrutinize them. These things are just true. And it doesn't mean that most of those things have a lot of validity and truth to them. But we need to do a better job of understanding and establishing how to be intellectually honest. Maybe we need to ask, there's 18 different steps inside of a conversation to be intellectually honest, to fully engage in another person's claims. Maybe there's 10. Maybe there's only 2. We're never going to know unless we actually talk about it and figure that out and ensure that we're doing that. And this topic is just so fucking complicated. It's insane. It's insane. I'm scratching the surface. There's so much here. There's so many problems. As long as we do not see that conversations yield good results instead of all of these different places inside of our lives that we interact with one another, conversations do not yield cooperative decision making, where we actually do have a democracy, where the voice of the people is being heard. And I know a lot of people will unpack that and say, no, that's really dangerous. People don't know what they want, and they have problems. And yeah, that's true. We're all way less intelligent than we could be. I sincerely believe, because of ego, that ego impedes intelligence, that as somebody you perceive to be an enemy, as they are saying something that is true or has a great deal of validity to it, you're trying to win the argument, you're trying to win the fight, you're trying to win it for your side. And because your actual principle is not to absolutely ensure that if there's any validity to the claims of anyone you are talking to, because that's not a core principle that everyone has, you're not going to be able to learn, and then you're going to have less knowledge, and that's going to skew your worldview and make you have actually even worse knowledge as you continually move on, worse logic, way more flaws, because this mechanism of the ego war, we're consistently seeing more and more people inside of our lives as our enemies, as we continually are trying to fulfill all of our different base human needs. But because we're so fucking terrible at having conversations, understanding anything of emotions, and oh, you're being emotional right now, and so there's another thing that's an argument avoidance device. Oh, you're being emotional right now. I can't talk to you. Or back in the 1930s, 1800s, you could say, oh, you're a woman, what do you know? Or right now, I really one that the younger generation is using against the older generations, and they don't care if the person is a boomer or not, but a person that's older than them will make a point, and then the younger person will say, okay, boomer, That's an argument avoidance device. The person made 1 to 5 to 10 different points about something, and you didn't want to engage in it, so you dismiss it. You don't have to engage in any of that by saying, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're part of this group that doesn't know what they're doing," and you unpack that like you're the reason we have global warming. You're the reason, or climate change. You're the reasons that we have all these different problems. It's all your fault. Your generation's fucked up, etc., etc., etc. Their worldview, again. So in argument avoidance devices, it's using anything to not engage in any of the points that the other person is making. And the more we see that the other person as an enemy, so a person who is completely for vaccines against sitting down somebody that actually thinks vaccines are terrible and horrible and should have never been invented, somebody that with that extreme of a view, them sitting down and having a conversation about vaccines, they both see each other as enemies, and we will see that they cannot engage in each other's claims, or they barely can at different points, as they feel social pressure, depending on the different social pressures they have inside of their lives and the views that they have as to how to ensure that, I should admit, I should give you this point. I'll give you that, you have that. But and I think that's even terrible. We shouldn't be giving anyone anything. If anyone ever is making a mildly good point to an immensely great absolute true point on the spectrum of somebody stating something and how good of the point is, if there's something there that is great and that is good that we all can learn from, we're all going to learn that. So we're not giving them something, they're giving us something, and we're learning from that. And we're not taking it at face value and using any nefarious reason to, which consistently happens, which is another one of the things of being a sycophant or flattery or all these other things, where we're lying to the other person because we feel like we're going to get something out of them we want, even though we do still view them as an enemy. We're using emotional manipulation or ego manipulating tactics, guilt tripping, gaslighting, all these different things. There's a very long list of these different nefarious behaviors where it's not being genuine, and we're not being true to ourselves, and we're going against our own base human need to actually think that we all have, is to be honest at all times, to just say what we legitimately think. But there's a huge list of reasons why we can't do that, especially as everyone has more and more ego inside of our society. Just speaking your mind and actually saying that, as other people, so many people inside of our society, I think the vast majority of people inside of our society, that this is on all of us, that we're continually not able to engage in other people's claims inside of all of our different lives, and we're disconnecting from one another as we understand all of these different topics less and less and less. We don't feel secure, and so then our stress levels continue to increase. That affects our sleep. That then affects the next day. Those continually accumulate over time. This is just an incredibly complicated fucking topic. It's insane. It's insane how complicated it is. There's so much. I'm still scratching the surface. There's so much more to be said. But I sincerely believe, once we figure this out, that it doesn't matter what it is. So like my brother sent me something yesterday about like what he thinks, where the coronavirus is coming from, and that it was actually man-made, and it doesn't matter what topic we want to talk about. It doesn't matter. It matters to the point of how important the topic is, and so obviously the coronavirus topic right now is very important. What I'm saying it doesn't matter is that there's just an incredibly long list of very important topics that need to be well understood. We haven't gotten into mental illness and how that happens, and how much that is nature versus nurture, or if it's all nature or all nurture. That there's so many topics that are really important that are affecting us, and we as the human species cannot understand them well when we are all legitimately, I sincerely believe, getting worse at having healthy conversations about complex topics. As these errors accumulate more and more inside of our society, as we frustrate each other more and more, as we go into conversations and there's even more things we can't talk about. We don't get to just speak our mind. It'll offend the other person, so we placate them. We feel like they're going to snap. We feel like they're going to turn on us, and they have the power, and if we say anything, they might fire us from our job or exclude us from the group or not want to be around us anymore and be our friend. Like, and then we get into the topic of fear, and so many people, I think, have an oversimplified view on fear, that we should never have any fears. And I think that we're continually trying to understand and identify things, just like with Inside of Judgment, that I think, oh gosh, this is so fucking complicated. I can continue to go on and on and on, and I want to. It's just, I'm dealing with my own things it's difficult to continue to put myself in the position, in the frame of mind, to be able to contemplate and process these things and come up with a list of them. This isn't the first time that I've done any of this. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I wanted to bring up Gmail. While I'm bringing that up, look at this. So here's the general public in 1994. That's moderate Democrat and Republican in 1994, which, let's look at this one first. Where is it? Let's look at this one first. Let's see. So you see how there's like overlaps and like a cone coming out from each. So this is Congress from 1949, and how they're voting on different bills. I don't think this is ideal at all. I think this is still terrible. But some work because some agreement can happen. And that's, again, another one of, and that's just another complicated thing. I think we don't understand how agreement and disagreement works, and we're really terrible at understanding that. And that I think we absolutely have to have a certain level of healthy agreement, which we need to unpack and understand it, and figure out what is healthy and why. But like for roommates to live inside of a household, they have to agree on so many different things. Otherwise, and I'm sure everyone's had these instances where they're frustrated with their roommate that they're not doing this, so they're not respecting that person, and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's just, inside of science, in order to construct things or work things, you have to come up with procedures and protocols, which is our agreements that, yes, this is how we do this thing, this is how we should do this thing, but then also, there's also another agreement of continually question it. Maybe we can refine it and make it better. There's always a certain level of agreement that produces healthy things, and we need to understand that. So there were some healthy things that were still here. It doesn't mean this time in this era in 1949 was perfect, great, or amazing at all in every way, because it wasn't. But that's even one of the problems with everything that as we're trying to assess and understand and go through all of these different things inside of human history, or looking at one person or a group or a time and era of what's happening inside of a society. None of this is as simple as, oh, that time was just bad and horrific and no one was good. Which is what a lot of people want to do by even the people that constructed the Constitution, that built this nation. There's a lot of flaws. There's a lot of really terrible things. There's a lot of really, really good things. Really fucking amazing nation building, society building, giving you many of the freedoms that you do have right now. And there's definitely ones you don't have. However, we're never going to figure that out if we don't have complex, specific, nuanced understandings of these things. If we continually paint everything with this huge fucking big brush of, oh, because they owned slaves, they were just horrible, despicable people, and all of their ideas are terrible. And this is again coming back to the whole ego war thing. As we view our enemies as these horrible, despicable people, we cannot validate and go through and we can't sift through all of their logic and behavior and look at this wide range. We can't see this wide array, this spectrum of all of their good, of the positive, the spectrum of positive behaviors, the spectrum of negative behaviors, the spectrum of good logic, and the spectrum of negative bad logic. We can't sift through all of that when we're just looking at somebody and going bad, horrible, despicable. Which I believe is exactly what we're doing. And this right here, as this is getting worse, this is ego, the rate of ego in our society continuing to build. And this right here is where third wave feminism, I believe, starts to happen. And third wave feminism causes this. And that's not because feminism is a bad, terrible thing. Again, we need to have nuanced perspective understanding, specific understandings. That over time, what's been happening, we've had the first, second, third, and fourth wave, and now we're in the fourth wave of feminism, that this whole ego war thing of viewing the other side as the enemy, so men versus women, this fight where one of the videos that I want to pull up is Jordan Peterson talking about where's the dominance. He's saying, where's the dominance? And he lists off that more men die from suicide, die in wars, that are injured, and die in work-related accidents. He lists off all these really bad things that men suffer from that we need to absolutely, very specifically, well understand. And we need to also very well understand all the issues that women are suffering from. This is the biggest problem that we have. This is, again, going back to the ego war, where not everyone has a voice, we're not listening, we're not able to understand any of the things that are happening, and how much when the ego war is allowing a person to be able to continually be in a position of power and control and dominance over another person, that their needs, their views, their time, etc. are all more important. And there's so many religions that support this patriarchal thing of that the man should just absolutely be in charge. And I think that's exactly what was happening back here and before 1949, that inside of every household, every man was in charge. Not every man. I think there's always exceptions to the rule, but for the vast majority of the population, most households, the father was just in supreme control, gets to just dictate what the woman does, and no one likes to be controlled. Their voice isn't being heard. Their base human needs are not getting met because they don't get to talk about them. Their needs are not important. And again, this is every single one of these points that I'm making are all on a scale. So the more ego that the dominant person has, the more their needs and their views and all that stuff is more important, more intensifiedly important. And that makes it even that the other person's other sides are less important. And that, I think, shows this in this example, that when a man, and it doesn't matter, this can absolutely be reversed. We're just going over very specifically what's been happening. I think people that will listen to this, I think toxic masculinity is, they think I'm constantly going to this point, and I actually have views on that I'll talk about here in a second. So we're looking at back in the 1950s, I think way too many households were just exactly like this, that the woman had a lot less ego, way more humble, and the man had a lot more ego and way less humble. And then I think it looks more like this, and probably even worse today, that in many situations people are continually trying to get into. And I think the reason that the relationships work out well at the very start is because any of the hard-hitting topics or any of the things that they want to bring, that they should and want to bring up, don't come up until much later, because at the start you've been through relationships in the past, and you've been trying to get your social base human needs met of what that we need to well understand, of the motivators of a person wanting to be in a relationship, and all the different wonderful emotions and feelings we get when all of that is happening at a very healthy level. We need to see that that's what people are striving for and going for, though there's definitely a lot to unpack there, that there's that somebody can be fulfilling a base human need in an unhealthy manner. Just like a person that's hungry drinking a Coca-Cola, they should be consuming something healthy, and they're not. And there's a lot of specific reasons why. And it's not soda. It's not that soda's bad for you. It's that specific soda's bad for you because of the ingredients it uses and how it's made, which is complicated. I just wanted to show that even there, like at every one of these points, is a complex, nuanced understanding that we have to be able to have. We need to be specific. We need to be accurate. And I believe that's exactly what we need to be doing in all of these different moments, is being accurate. And the ego war doesn't allow us to, because when we try and be accurate, the person that has the most ego in the room that feels like you trying to be accurate is impeding on their power of being in control and making the decisions, gets to then that is going to mock you and tear you down and do anything they can in any of these nefarious, terrible things that are going to make it to where make it so that your credibility is ruined. And this is what we also see, I mean, just inside of our mainstream media, where Tulsi Gabbard running for president, a woman of color, a congresswoman, a veteran, things that the Democrats champion, was running for fucking president. And if you look back on how they covered her, just look on every single video covering her of CNN and all of the different outlets, from TV to articles, we can see when people don't agree with who you are and what you represent, they will smear you and attack you. And this is where that ego war comes into play, because they fear she will get into power and they won't get what they want. And what they want is to continue to be the corporations that control them, to continue to give them the money and the power that they have, of the influence that they have over the American people, that they are starting to see for a while now that is waning. That more people are distrusting the mainstream media because, and not all the time, absolutely not all the time, but way too often, they are legitimately lying. And then when Donald Trump is calling them on fake news, it's legitimate. They legitimately are saying things that are untrue, or they are exaggerating them. They're making them seem worse than they are. But not all the time. Sometimes they're definitely saying things that are true, and it is good reporting, and they are making good points. And he still calls it fake news, because those are his enemies, and he can't give them anything inside of the ego war, because that is giving your enemies ammunition that gives them clout, it gives them credibility, it gives them, especially when any of the points that they're making are criticisms of his behavior. And this is not just Republican versus Democrat. This has every single thing to do with the interpersonal marriage, with the parent-child relationship. But let's stay with the marriage. That as a couple is inside of a relationship, and we're looking at here in 2020, or we can really go from like 1990 to 2020. But during this time frame, these bars are going to change. They're going to go up and down, and this is the average couple in the United States. Because absolutely, as we go into specific cases, both of these bars, all four of these bars between these two people are going to go up and down depending on the different ways that they were brought up, how the different principles that they were taught by their parents. being able to love and respect and understand and listen and engage in their person's emotions, etc., because there's definitely a lot of nuance here that we need to well understand. But I think that of the things that are healthy, those are way more few and far between, and way too much of the things we're looking at are these incredibly negative, toxic scenarios where the behaviors I was just describing, of where Donald Trump cannot engage in what the mainstream media is ever saying is absolutely true. When there are ever criticisms of him, he can't. I don't think that he has the ability to be able to do that. And it's not his fault. I don't think this is Donald Trump's fault. I sincerely believe that the reasons that he was voted in, that all of the complicated equation that yielded people to go to the voting booths to vote for Donald Trump, I think there's a lot of things that people have been consistently saying over the last 3 years, trying to figure out why people voted for Donald Trump. I think the biggest thing that we're missing is the ego war. That inside of the ego war, when people are consistently seeing that conversations do not yield good results, conversations do not yield cooperative decision making, that the only way we get shit done is by having the biggest, brash, most egotistical person fighting for our side in charge. I think that's why he got voted in. I sincerely believe that. I believe that's why they all didn't care too much about his behavior that they saw when he was debating Hillary Clinton, when he was talking at all in his campaigns, how he was talking about out at his rallies, that any of the bad behavior we ever saw, that I believe there was a great deal of it. They don't see that because it's like Nicki Minaj versus Cardi B. And let's say you're an incredible Cardi B fan. You actually have crazy posters. When Cardi B and her when Nicki Minaj and her fans are attacking Cardi B, when you attack back and your bad behaviors, you feel they're justified, and you start to get to a point where you're desensitized and you don't even see them. That you're not even aware of any of the hypocrisy or bigotry that they're displaying to the other side, as you're intolerant of their views because your camp, your group is better, is right, and they are attacking you, and you're defending yourself. And this is where we get into this whole thing of attack to ego, humble, dominant, submissive, attack, defend. That inside of these situations, because of this scenario of where more people are like this, have a lot more ego, and actually the level of humbleness when they have this much ego is way less. This isn't perfect. I just drew this up a little bit ago. That as this continually happens inside of our society in so many different instances that we can see, that I think there's just a great list of. We can see here. So from similar to this, well, look how polarized we are. This is 2011. This is 9 years ago. And we go here from 1994 to 2017, and even moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans of the general public on all topics that are important to us, our healthcare system, our financial system, our immigration, all these different topics that we're continually talking about, how much people are getting. It's just a lot of topics that we all want to be able to discuss that we cannot discuss very well because we are all terrible at having healthy conversations, and we can't even acknowledge and see that because, again, looking at our bad behaviors and acknowledging that is giving our enemies that we have more and more of, as we are all getting even more worse at having conversations, as the ego is continually getting worse and lowering our intelligence and lowering our ability to be able to see our own bad behaviors. There's another diagram thing I have. Where is it? So this is person and group actually. But so I've described this a couple times but there's a range of good views, a range of good behaviors, a range of bad behaviors, a range of bad views. And as instead of our interpersonal relationship or Republican versus Democrat, at even you can see moderate ones, because we even used to be even closer than that. And when we're like this, there's more levels of agreement where we get to then make more cooperative decision making. But as we get worse at having conversations, we can't make cooperative decision making here. There's when the moderate people are so far apart, and then we go to politically engaged. Holy fuck! Look at that. That's insane. And it didn't used to be that bad. Look at 1994 politically engaged. 2017. Way too much of the population are so polarized in all of these different topics. And we're seeing this time and time again. Tulsi Gabbard was even bringing it up, and so many different people about when people were talking about the gun debate. Too many people are saying take everyone's guns away and insanely strict regulations on guns. And the other side is saying no regulations at all. And we can't have on that topic, we can't have a nuanced, complex understanding of any of the things that we can't have that discussion. And as we continually see that we can't have that discussion, as well as all these other ones, and all these things are continually frustrating us. And it's not just at the political level, but when we start talking about in our interpersonal lives of how to parent, how to treat one another, how our trust works, how when a person cheats on another person, you cheated, like when your spouse cheats on you, or when your friend disowns you, when we are falling apart, we are crumbling as a human society. All of the large things, except for mayhem and murder, are significantly getting worse. Though there is data we need to look at for murder. It's happening in London and many other places, and look at all the incredible amounts of wars and insane chaos that's happening across the world. Before the coronavirus, and then now during the coronavirus, and specifically the coronavirus, there's a lot of decisions that we all have to make in order to deal with this threat, and we can't make them together when we are like this. When we're like this, when more of our individuals have way more ego instead of our society, we see more people that that are not completely aligned with our views, that have any difference of opinion. The more ego a person has, the more that of a person they feel like that person, it's like a feminist having a conversation with a men's rights activist. And it's not I've met some feminists that I believe have a decent level of ability to be intellectually honest, and I'm not saying that to degrade them at all. Again, when we're assessing and understanding something, I think we need to be coming from a place. No, I haven't said this yet, but I'm going over is basically how complicated this is, and I haven't said this in how long I've been recording. 53 minutes. That we should come from a place of love, empathy, and understanding, and being empathetic doesn't mean lying and making the other person, saying something just to make the other person feel good. That of every single thing, and we're assessing and trying to understand and present, we are trying to be absolutely specific and accurate as possible and say what we legitimately think, and then the other person engages in what we think, and we engage in what they think, and we go back and forth, and we figure out how we do this. We figure out how we be intellectually honest. We still manage each other's positions. We understand what's happening here. What we're trying to understand inside of this complex topic, whatever it is, on whether or not abortion should be legal, ever, at what point, at what nuanced, complex understanding abortion should be legal, or it should be absolutely illegal, or we should have late-term abortions, or you should be able to abort your baby 3 months after they're born. Like, there are people that are actually calling for late-term abortions to where almost to the level of birth, to the time of birth, and we're just getting so bad at we can't figure these things out, and these things are continually frustrating everyone. We're continually going away from our conversations, again, not just political ones, Instead of our interpersonal relationships, of course, the political ones start coming up. And those, when we're having those conversations, those things also affect our interpersonal relationships. But then there's also very specific things we have to deal with every day, which are, where do I have that? It's like the work that has to be done every day, like all the different tasks that we have and responsibilities on our shoulders. And how much we feel like we're a team and we're doing this together, and how much we feel isolated and alone, and like the other person doesn't understand us and doesn't want to help us and doesn't see our problem here, and here that they're doing that's negatively impacting us, or other people are negatively impacting us, like our siblings are. We're having a fight with our parents, or all of these external forces or internal forces or internal variables are applying on these different levels of pressure and stress on all of us. And when we are, and I think that it's exacerbating ego, because then there's the thing that's the amygdala hijack, whereas and I think we've all been in this, when we've been inside of an interpersonal relationship fight of where we're really, really, really angry, and we're yelling and we're doing the blame game thing of, oh, you're a shitty mom because of this, and we are attacking them. And that there's a certain level of how angry a person is and how frustrated they are, that the cortisol, adrenaline, and a couple other hormones that we need to specifically understand are flooding their brain, and it is actually impeding their ability to be to have rational thought, to be able to see their behavior right then, to be able to have not just to have introspection, and be able to be intellectually honest and want to engage in that person's claims. We'll see people get, I think one of the things that always happens is people's speech starts getting less specific and way more oversimplified, way more generic, way more absolute, in the way that they, oh, everyone does this all the time, or you always do this, and stuff like that. And maybe the person does that like 4 times a month, and it does happen a lot depending on what the thing is. But then it makes the other person feel like, oh, I do this all the time, really all the time. And this fight that goes back and forth, this amygdala hijack of as our stressors continually increase, as the ego level of the populace increases, we become even worse at having conversations, understanding ourselves and understanding each other. We're stretching each other out more. We're becoming more disconnected, more lonely, more feeling like of the tasks we have to complete every day, of our responsibilities, of our strife and our struggle, of how few people that we even go to talk to. We try and explain our scenario of what we're dealing with, and the person, our cousin or our parents or our friends, our siblings, they can only understand what we're saying to a certain degree, and we're frustrated that they don't understand us, that they don't understand our views or what we did. And maybe we're wrong in so many different ways, but if any ways that we are right, they also still lack that ability to be able to see that, because they are flawed. They don't understand human behavior really well. They have a great deal of ego as well. They are part inside of another just cog in the fucking wheel of this incredible chaos of the 350 million people that live inside of our country, and how much we affect and are connected with one another, of the different things that happen inside of our society, of the different bills that get passed, or like when Donald Trump got voted in as president, how that changed how people were talking with one another, how people were treating one another, how people would continually still removed friends and family members from their lives if they support Trump. I think Trump's the worst president we've ever had, and we can't criticize him because of the ego war. But we need to be able to criticize and scrutinize anything and everyone. I think that is a core principle that builds a healthy society, that of anything and everything, of vaccines and pharmaceuticals and how any of these different things work, or any official or authority, doctor, Surgeon General, the FDA, it doesn't matter who it is. If they say something, they should have the ability, and we should have the ability to be able to scrutinize and question that. They should have the ability to be able to engage in any of the criticisms that anyone has. But because of the ego war chaos, when people are giving criticisms, they're not doing it in an incredibly healthy manner. They're not even doing it in a remotely healthy manner. Too often, it's using a lot of bad behavior and a lot of oversimplified logic that then people use those things as an argument avoidance device. Oh, I don't want to engage in that because, well, you're being emotional, or you're really mad and upset right now, and maybe that person feels that their child got vaccines from autism. Maybe that's absolutely not true, but we're never going to know and understand that if we can't have a conversation about it. If anytime it's being brought up, every single person hearing that feels like that's deflating the argument and saying vaccines, there's a problem with vaccines. Oh, there's criticism coming into vaccines. Oh, okay, that means vaccines are terrible and bad, right? They're just terrible. Okay, how many people's lives have they saved? And they'll go through all of this stuff, and they're making good points, really good points that need to be understood. But again, when we're looking at any situation, it's either bad or good. It's black and white. This is very binary thinking of this insane oversimplification of where we cannot understand the complex, nuanced understanding of what we need to be able to have to sift through and understand what is good and great and amazing, and what is bad and terrible and poor, and how we be able to understand that on the topics of vaccines. Maybe we do need to change the scheduling. Maybe we do need to change the ingredients. Maybe we don't need vaccines anymore at all once we understand how our microbiomes work and how the immune system works, and we put an incredible amount of effort in that, and we never need vaccines again because everyone just has an incredible immunity to most viruses and bacteria on the face of the planet, because we understand immune systems really well. We don't have to make anything man-made because, anyways. And maybe that's true, or maybe it's not. Maybe we absolutely need vaccines, and we're only getting 4 things wrong with it, or maybe we're getting nothing wrong with it. But again, we can't understand that if we cannot have conversations about it, and it can be scrutinized, meaning it should be scrutinized, because every single topic of all these different things, they do affect us in grave and great ways on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, our lifespan basis of understanding our emotions and mental illness to addiction. All of these different things is really complicated topics that I think that when I start having conversations with people, they just I'm so frustrated about it, and I'm not trying to attack them. It's so frustrating to go and talk to people, and they're like, oh, I think it's just simple. Everyone can just be good person. It's not hard to be a good person. And I absolutely believe that if we dissected that person's life, we'll see so many different places that they are good, they are great, they have strength. And then we will also see where they fail and they have bad logic and they're mistreating their children and they don't understand themselves and their partner in so many different ways, and they're continually making the same mistakes over again on emotional ones, and that allows them not to be able to connect with their partner very well, to financial ones that affects their whole family. But when they present the information, then when they present their view on good behavior and bad behavior so simplistically that, oh, it's not hard to be a good person, we're not coming and understanding why anyone is ever displaying any bad behavior with that insanely oversimplified logic, as we continually see how people are being treated, and it builds up their worldviews of how they get their base human needs met when they're 3, of getting attention from their parents, and what their parents are dealing with, and what the capability. Have I even said the word capability yet? I don't think so. That's just another huge thing. Why anyone's capable of any good, great, amazing, terrible behavior, I probably have. I'm sorry. I'm really fucking tired. But whether or not their parents are capable of being able to engage and sit down and talk with them and play with them and feel joy with them as their parents are suffering from addiction or mental illness or a severe lack of sleep that's actually significantly getting worse. That is a topic that is so fucking important that we need to understand. As important as racism, sleep is, it's just incredible, like how much that is negatively, that is exacerbating, making all of this worse, that the quality and quantity of sleep that is actually making people's ability to function, their cognitive abilities of being able to feel different emotions, to produce their hormones, how much it affects the microbiome. It's incredibly complicated, and we're not going to understand any of this, and we're going to continually not understand sleep, our microbiomes, vaccines, etc. Just the list is so long. We're all going to get worse at understanding these things as we all get worse at having conversations, as the ego war mechanisms, the negative variables, and all the ways, things that are terrible about us having conversations continually get worse as more and more people inside of our society continually feel they are not doing anything wrong. They cannot see their own bad behaviors. They can't. They have continually built up these massive ego walls to protect themselves as they are constantly getting attacks from so many people throughout their lifetime. And then we want to point to one instance where somebody's displaying that bad behavior of incredible levels of ego. And well, that's just a shitty person. Fuck no. No, that's not what's happening there. Yes, they're displaying really bad behavior that we absolutely need to be very specifically understand, illustrate, and let them know they need to take personal responsibility for it, but not to the level of it's 100% on their shoulders. How all of society does not understand well how to have conversations, what ego is, how all these different mechanisms that of how we're frustrating one another, and how they were treated, how they were consistently being attacked their whole lives, and they build up this wall of ego, and their views of how to get their base human needs met, these huge lists of base human needs of intimacy and sex and understanding and having a voice and having control over so many different facets of their life, having stability, trust, being able to feel peace and sleep well. I'm just a huge list. Being able to obviously have food on their plate, be valued at work. I'm just an incredible, huge list of base human needs. It's not just the word love. It is not just everyone needs to be loved. I sincerely believe every single thing that I've described in this video has every single thing to do with love. This, I sincerely believe, is all encompassed under the umbrella of the science of love, that us understanding these things is us loving one another, us taking the time and the effort and energy, the mental energy, to engage in these thoughts and engage in each other's claims, to understand human behavior, how to be intellectually honest, how to engage in each other's claims, how we change this, how we reverse this, how we reverse this back to here, and even way better than that, how we reverse this, because this is Congress, but I actually think this is representative. These are human beings inside of a society. These are human beings inside of a society, and I think the exact same mechanisms that make this happen inside of just our congressmen and women also made it for our general public to go from here from 1994 to here to 2017. The levels of ego and people even championing this bad behavior because people continually see, oh yeah, you're defending yourself and you should do that, because the other person was using bad behavior and a lot of ego to, when they were giving their criticisms, they were doing it so with bad behavior, and that's way too. And this goes into the levels of maturity, that a person being able to be mature enough to be able to hear criticisms of their behavior and of their logic. I believe this is actually something that is going down inside of our society, that the vast majority of people, their maturity to be able to do that is decreasing. And when people, I constantly see Tim Pool and Joe Rogan and many other people point this out when they see this, that the person cannot hear criticism. They can't take personal responsibility for their behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. It's very specifically, I believe, because of this ego war, because people were continually using a lot of bad behavior when they're giving criticisms. Their motivators are not pure, not completely pure. It's not that they're all horrible and wrong and they're just completely terrible people, but because of the whole enemy thing, and they are attacking the other side. They are using attacks against their enemies, and they're trying to do so with as sound logic as they feel they can come up with and muster, and they, because of their level of ego, they think their logic is supreme and good and great, and they lack the ability to be able to question it. So and then the other side is attacking them. So it's both sides just continually attacking each other. This is why we need to watch like reality TV shows and as much debate and conversation. When people are going at it and going back and forth, we can see this. Both sides are attacking one another. So when criticism is coming into a person, when a person is seeing criticism, they are seeing that they are being attacked. They're being told that their views are wrong, their behavior is wrong, and so many different instances inside of their life that was being used as a mechanism to put them into a submissive and humble role where the other person is dominant and the other person gets to make the decisions of what the debate is about. Whatever it is, they get to make, the other side gets to make the decisions, and then they're also saying that the other side is not and lacks a great ability to be able to engage in the claims that they're making. Again, this is complicated. We're all doing this to each other. Both sides, everyone, men versus women, feminism versus men rights activists, Republican versus Democrat, at all levels of our lives, everyone is continually seeing each other as these enemies of where inside the ego wall. So here's the range of good behaviors. That's what, range of good views. So here's green right there. Purple is good behaviors. We got bad views, yellow. So this is this person's right here. Then they have their ego wall. And then I haven't finished with this yet. I was trying to, there's a lot more that needs to go here, and I was going to put stuff here on the side. But as these two people are having a conversation, their ego wall and level of intensity of ego continually is fluctuating depending on the attacks that they feel like their voice isn't being heard, they're not being engaged in, and they again are these fears start coming up inside of them. Like, oh, they're 30, they're 40, they're in their fourth relationship, they're in their second relationship, and when how their parents treated them and their friends treated them as their friends and their family members as they were growing up, and all of these different accumulated instances, all these different instances that are accumulating these negative variables of the ego war, the chaos inside of that, of where they were constantly being attacked in so many different ways, just on their preferences. They would say, I like this, or I like that. Oh gosh, there's how many times our preferences or things that we can or cannot do. We just see this everywhere. I was thinking of like Joey Diaz. He was, one of the nuns was really mean and abusive, and I think physically abusive to him. So he was physically abusive back to her. So we're hearing a story of a boy beating up an older woman, and the crowd is cheering him. They're cheering him because the woman was not letting him have a voice, didn't care about him as a human being, and was being mean, overbearing, abusive, and dominant. And these are the things that we're not ridding and specifically identifying from our society. And instead of doing so, we're just cheering when somebody is fighting back against that. And that's it. We're stopping there. We're like, yeah, that's the end of the conversation. We don't need to expand upon this anymore. No, that's totally fine that he doesn't like certain things because she liked them. And how many... I just was reading... I constantly read things from people who are like, because my parents were Republican, I'm Democrat. There was no way I was going to be Democrat or Republican. That children, I think, rebel against parents because of the authoritarian control from the ego place of parents dominating and literally dictating and controlling their children's lives. No one likes to be controlled, and so they're constantly seeing inside of society. Children are seeing inside of society, inside of television shows and movies, that I can just rebel against my parents. I can just tell them to go fuck off. I can question them. I can tell them that they're wrong. Whereas there was definitely a point, I think, in every child's life that there was a time they didn't think any of those things. And this, again, is the whole feminism thing of the first, second, and third waves of feminism, that as a person is being continually controlled, their voice isn't being heard, of their views on how different things work inside of a relationship, inside of a household, a family. They have all these different concerns. They don't have a voice in that because the other person has a great deal of ego and dominance over them. and they won't and lack a great deal of ability to be able to engage in what they're saying, and just an incredible amount of control that we need to really well understand, list out and unpack of women in the 1800s, how a man can take his wife to a mental institution and say my wife is hysterical. And I actually believe there was actually a great deal of hysterical and irrational behavior being displayed by women at that time. And it's not because they're women. This is again where we get correlation versus causation. Instead of all these different areas of scientific fields of study, when we are trying to understand something, we are not understanding it well. When we are looking at arguing as a problem, and that's what I have here. So we're looking at when people say, "Oh, it's not about politics," because we're misidentifying the issue. The things that are making politics, judgment, arguing, and debating bad, these things are not inherently wrong. These things have to happen. We need good judgment, arguing, and debating. I don't think we would have anything that we have today. We also need good politics. But the bad side of all of these different things, I don't think is also well understood, even though we are describing it quite like people are like, "Oh, I'm not judging you." People are coming from a place of ego when they are engaging in politics. People are coming from a place of ego when they are judging somebody else. So if they view the person at all to be, if they view when they're judging something, and they have a great deal of ego when they see if it's somebody they like, or they think they're going to get something from this person or this group, they will lie a little bit or a lot, depending on the level of ego, to make it look better, to make them look better. Like if their singing performance, or how well they did anything, or their views, if they think coming from a place of ego, they will placate or sycophantry behavior. They will do a lot of different nefarious things. They will not be honest. Ego makes us lie. And so they will lie about their side and people they champion. They will exaggerate things, even though they're making good, valid points almost always. And even some things that are really true quite often. But the same thing on the other side, and if it's their enemy, they will lie and exaggerate. And this is, again, goes back to CNN or the mainstream media lying and exaggerating Donald Trump ever. They are doing that on a consistent daily basis. They are lying and exaggerating. It's not that they're never saying anything that's true or accurate. Sometimes they definitely are. It's just getting worse and more few and far between as these sides continue to fight with one another. And again, this is not just Republican versus Democrat. This is every facet of human beings' lives. This is every area where we need judgment in order to make decisions. We need to be able to assess a situation, understand how it works, understand what the problems are, how and the good things are about it, whether it's how we're spending our money as a family, what we believe to be healthy, and what food we have in the house, and who gets to eat what when, when we're going to sleep, how we're talking to each other at the dinner table. We're assessing these situations, we're assessing, and we are judging other people's behaviors constantly. And we need good judgment, but we're not. Instead of coming from a place of love, compassion, understanding, and and great desire to be accurate with every single thing that we view, instead of coming from that place, way too often, is coming from a place of ego and this attack, defend thing that is constantly happening inside of our people's society. And this is again where I think that when we go inside of looking at reality TV shows, especially ones that have been on for like 5 or 10 years, we will see. I know they're on camera. I know that they're faking to a somewhat certain degree, even though that is also a very specific behavior of a person in that certain situation, knowing that they're on camera and behaving a particular way. But this is still their lives. They still have to. We're still seeing a great deal of human behavior that I think is absolutely valid, and we need to well understand. And we can see how friends and family members, husbands and wives, are all treating one another, interacting with one another, as again they're trying to get all of these different base human needs met. and we will see them do bad at arguing, doing bad at debating, doing bad at judgment because of the ego war chaos, and us as a whole, us as humanity, just like for all complicated topics of like vaccines, of how the financial system works, or anything like that. Us understanding these things really well helps us make really good decisions. We do not understand human behavior any near real well at all. I can go off on to I can there's a long list of there's evidence that's showing, or there's a lot of scientific studies, of all the different scientific studies that are done on lots of different topics, different categories. So like, let's just say categories, the category of how food affects the body. So like if they do a study on vitamin C or how ginger affects the flu, there's those different types of studies, and there's problems with their scientific studies. And there's many different YouTube videos. There's 3 different ones from Veritasium, the SciShow guys, and Last Week Tonight did on scientific studies, that there's problems with them, that they're not as simple as being able to cite a scientific study and just saying that well, then that's just supremely true and let's all move forward with that information. I wish it was that true, but it's not. There's problems with scientific studies that we need to understand. Then when we get into the category of psychology studies, there's worse problems here. So the same problems that exist within inside of the ones of how food affects the bodies, as well as many other scientific studies, there's a lot of problems there that we need to unpack and understand. It doesn't mean that all of it, but that also isn't setting up a thing where, well, you can use that as an argument avoidance device, that somebody cites a scientific study, well, that just can't be true because there's problems with scientific studies. That's not the logical reasoning at all. Again, we need to dissect and sift through every single point that anything's making, see the methodology. Even if there was something wrong with the test, we can learn something from it. Anyways, moving over to the psychological studies, more of them, they're wildly unreproducible. So they cannot peer review, or they cannot, what is it called when other people appear, it's not just not peer reviewed study, because that's just reviewing the study by people inside of the same field. I can't remember the terminology for it right now, but where they actually try and do the exact same methodology that a study did before to see if they get the same results. And specifically in the category of psychology, they're worse off. I really believe we do not understand human behavior any near well at all. Maybe there's 30 variables here. And between, oh my gosh, just look at this list. It's incredible. Wait, where is it? Do I have it over here? Yeah. I mean, this is not well organized, and I apologize. But I mean, just look at this: actions, listening, blame, determination. Our base capacities are that's supposed to say base capability. Base capabilities is what that's supposed to say. Sorry, our capabilities. How we use labels to identify people, but I think we need labels and we need to be accurate and specific. But again, this is another place where we're using correlations and causation, where we're being very generic and oversimplifying things. And when we're assigning somebody a label, it's not being intellectually honest, and it's causing more harm than good. Blame, apathy, bravery, courage, hope, respect, shame, processing information, maturity, failure, fears, fight or flight, greed, resentment, independent, codependence. Oh, and I heard one recently, interdependence, sleep, trust, value, how we value each other in so many different ways in our interpersonal relationships and broader society, judgment, suicide, addiction, homelessness, expectations, laziness, lying, excuses, gossip, confidence, negativity, evidence, facts, how we dogmatism, how our opinions, people and I did this so many times in my life. You describe a fact as, or you describe your opinion like it's fact. So you read a study, you then drew a conclusion what you believe that study means, and then you say what your opinion of that study to other people, and then they're supposed to just take that at face value because you read the study or you heard about it, and this is what it is, this is how it works. And then maybe you have and then probably people have the level, and then the people definitely have the level of ego where, yeah, this is definitely how that works, and you should take this at face value, and if you don't, then I'm going to be offended, and people are there. Emotions versus logic. This I was touched on earlier when I talked about the amygdala hijack. That as a person's as a person gets more and more upset inside of a conversation, there are very specific emotions they're feeling. So I don't think it's emotion versus logic. I think it's very specific emotions that impede their ability to be logical. And the more that they are upset, and the more that they're angry, the more that they're frustrated, the more that they have this very specific hormones flowing through their system that actually makes it to where they get into this fight or flight mode, and their amygdala is more dominant in controlling the situation than their prefrontal cortex, and their ability to be able to feel love and empathy, etc. All these different things decrease. But I very specifically think that it is very specific emotions that do this, and there's actually emotions that do the exact opposite. That then allows some, and so I don't think it's as simple as emotions versus logic, and this is where we get into the whole camp of binary thinking, black and white thinking, as well as correlation versus causation. If we think emotions are just the problem, that's still correlation, and the causation is very specific emotions and very specific levels of how, of those emotions, of those feelings. How, like, I still think a person can be displaying some level of anger and frustration and still have good cognitive ability, still feel empathy. It doesn't mean as soon as somebody gets anywhere near upset or anywhere near frustrated that they're just incredibly stupid and they can't make any logical thoughts at all. That's nowhere near that simple. Blaming the symptoms instead of the many different root systems and their mechanisms. Isolation, loneliness, how we're social creatures, depressed, how we're unaware. How much we are unaware of us as individuals? Yeah, that's not worded very well. Sorry. I think I have loneliness in here twice. Control F. Lonely. Yep, I've got loneliness in here twice. Depression, mental illness, stress, anxiety, anger, self-reflection, base human needs, which I've talked about several times, which I still haven't illustrated here. And so you can see, even here, this is a document I made a long time ago, but you can see how long I've been thinking and talking about this. All of that green text was made by my friend Jesse. So I believe we can figure this out. I believe we have to figure this out. I do not believe we can fix any of these issues that we are all seeing as problems of our society, like racism and sexism, human trafficking, rape. I believe we can understand all of these things. We can fix them when we understand them really well, and we can come together and get behind really good ideas, because we will then have a good level of agreement, and instead of being split, we will be closer to here, but even way better than this, where we actually will be able to make joint decisions together, cooperative decisions together in all of these different areas of our lives, inside of our government, our federal, state governments, city, local governments, inside of our interpersonal relationships, our friendships, our marriages, our partnerships, parent-child relationships. In all of these different places, we're all continually trying to figure out how to make decisions together, and we are doing it really, really badly, as we are not very specifically identifying what ego is and how to remove it from our society. I believe once we do that, we can then well understand all of these different things that are making it to where we are disconnecting, that are causing the loneliness, the suicide, homelessness, just a large list of things that are making it to where we cannot function. None of this is sustainable. None of this is sustainable, and there's so many other things that I can go over that are not sustainable. Like organic food isn't going to be organic in like 15 years because of how many pesticides inside of the environment. And maybe that's not true, but if it is true, we need to well understand it and do something about it. If there are problems with pesticides, which I believe that there are, but we need to go through that. We need to well understand that, especially with how much these things are negatively impacting our immune systems, making us weaker. We can't well understand these things of what makes us healthy and why, what makes a healthy ecosystem inside of a society, what makes a healthy person, a healthy family unit, a healthy couple. We cannot well understand these things when we are so terrible at having conversations about them. We need to figure out how to have conversations, what's supposed to happen, how to listen. Maybe we're supposed to ask a lot of questions when listening. We listen for a little bit, we don't cut them off, or we figure out when we should cut them off. Like they're going off on this tangent. Maybe they're not displaying the great behavior like they're going on, like just like I am doing inside of this hour and 30-minute video. I know so many people are frustrated with I go off on tangent, but that's so hard. So many things are connected, and there's so much to explain and describe and paint a picture, and to explain this, and like if I just said food is medicine right now, and in that conversation, and I'm having a conversation, we have 8 hours to talk, or whatever, to be able to engage in that claim, I'm gonna have to pull up an incredible amount of videos and studies, and also explain them and explain my views where I don't agree with this particular study or this point in this video, and I agree with this one, or I think this is how it works, and doing all of that as they're listening. They also need to be engaging and giving their thoughts and also asking questions. But even here, we need to figure this out. I don't want us to go by what I'm saying right now. Let's list out all of these different things that help us get and gather better information to make better decisions as soon as possible, which is, where is that? Principles. Gather as much information and continue to desire more information to make a better decision. What are all the different ways as we as individuals, family units, communities, and nation gather, assess, and spread information about complicated topics? And how bad are we at doing that today? And again, I really believe it's because of the ego war that is making it to where we went from this to this. And I think it's been going on for 30 years. So we're in 2020, and it's it's probably longer than that. Like it's right around here, and then 80s where it just starts getting worse. It starts separating, and then it gets more, and then you can see it just gets more apparent as we move on. And again, I know this is just congressmen, but I really believe that as people see, this is how we have conversations. This is how we exchange information. This is how we engage in the person's claims. As we see authority figures, we see people on television, we see political pundits, we see people that went to Harvard, to Ivy League schools, that went to higher level education, that went into political science, that took classes on communication and rhetoric, arguing with each other in such incredibly terrible ways. In fact, we're gonna watch a video really quick, and then we'll wrap up this video. So here I'm trying to make the list of the proof of the ego war disease, which if I was doing this, I'm sorry, this is all in caps right here. I apologize about that. But anyways, if ever since the 13,000 hours I've been thinking about this, if I've been doing my due diligence to make a list of all of this here, this list would be much bigger. And that's one of the things I'm doing with my YouTube. So on YouTube, I have I have a couple different playlists. So I've got one here, but so I've got one I just made to coronavirus. So anything related to the coronavirus that also is glaringly showing how bad we are having conversations and understanding a complex topic. Every single one does. Every single one. So sometimes, so before the coronavirus ever happened, I have one called How We Are Wrong. And it's a pretty long list that goes, like you can see, it just reloaded because I've been making this list for a long time. There's just so many. It's just a long list. If I was of the points that I saw in there and any of the data or the studies or articles and different points they had that I believe are illustrating or directly showing or indirectly showing proof that the ego war exists, or the mechanisms that's showing what's happening there. This list would be longer, but right now that's all I've got. I've got like 4 things. And you see one of them here. So political polarization, that's this one. Then divided Congress is this one. Then the video we're going to watch is this one. Then another one is this one that I think is really interesting. That rudeness is contagious. And so this is where I think bad behavior criticism coming from an authority figure instead of a company. So as like a boss or a manager yells at a particular person and adds a lot of stress on that person, that and there's just so much to unpack here, and I well understand of they're worried about losing their job if they don't do it really well. Not making enough money for their other employees, that other people are relying on them, like all of this pressure, and then the person, so they're usually making some good and valid points, but they're also again oversimplifying things to a great degree usually as well, when they have all these different levels of ego or high levels of ego. And I think ego is 0 to 100. Do I have that there? I thought, yeah, 0 to 100%. So like the level of intensity of ego a person has, like this is where I think narcissism is the 80, 90, 100 percentile. I think that's what narcissism is this level up here. Maybe it starts at 70, but when you're this high, like all of your actions, every way you think is just about you all of the time. And then the lower this goes, the more you're able to think about yourself and other people. But anyways, so as a person gets yelled at and is being told that their job performance or whatever it is being told to them in such a really negative manner, which again we will see inside of television shows and so many other different places where we can watch a video or audio or listen to audio of these instances of people in a workplace or the stories that they talk about them afterwards, so we can actually see the real-time events of those things taking place. That's better, because people's account, but also hearing people's accounts afterwards also gives us some really interesting things about like how the human mind works and how memory, and how their ego wall is protecting themselves, they will lie about their boss in some different ways, and they lack the integrity to be honest and accurate about those things. That it's kind of like the whole fuck you mentality. Because you were mean and horrible to me, I don't need to say anything good about you, even if I ever saw it. Which again, which also you probably couldn't. Not you. So when I'm saying you, I mean one, like the general you. But way too many people will they'll see that they're being attacked. And in a lot of ways, and a lot of the social pressures on them of, again, they need to be able to make money and food for their families, they have car payments, they just bought a house, or they've had a house for 20 years, they're trying to pay that off. Everyone's at all these different levels of responsibilities and stressors inside of their lives, and then not just at any one moment, like this, not just one thing that happens inside of their lives, where one time that they see a person coming and attacking them, it's been happening for a very long time inside of their lives. This is this disease of ego, which I think is so interesting, that ego is a contagious thing that happens inside of our society, that as more people see other people displaying it, especially if when they display it, they get things like Donald Trump continually displays a lot of egotistical, brash behavior, and he wins deals. People see that he's gaining power in different ways and then start becoming his support system of being these sycophants that constantly tell him that everything he thinks is awesome and amazing, and they do a lot of things for him, and like they don't have the ability and cannot question him and help him see if he's ever wrong. Though I do believe that changed to some degree here with the coronavirus, because of its level of seriousness and how much it's going to negatively impact the American people, but very specifically Republicans were going to be negatively impacted, and it probably was going to make it to where he couldn't get reelected if he didn't start taking this seriously. So there's still I think there's a really good motivator here, where there is a lot of people that do have a lot of good motivators that really care about people they don't legitimately know. Like, there are people you don't know right now that exist inside of America, that are Democrats, Republicans, and so many different. And so they, like, of these people that are higher up, it's not always this incredibly nefarious thing, but I think way too often it is that they definitely want to stay in control and power, and too many of the decisions of what they do and how they talk are in pursuit of that goal and not the goal of truth and principle and lots of really great principles that make a healthy society. It's again more just to the whole ego war chaos thing of maintaining control and power and dominance, to be able to then make the decisions. Again, this is continually coming down to decisions at so many different levels of our society, and who gets to make them, and whose voice is heard. And the logical reasoning is not as simple as everyone's voice just gets heard, or everyone does deserve a voice, but it's not as simple as that's it. That's all we need to know to be able to from now on just move forward. We don't need to go and engage in any of the points that I made in this hour and 42 minutes. We just need to know everyone deserves a voice and move forward with that. We will continue to make incredibly terrible mistakes as we do not well understand what ego is, how all these different lists of these negative variables that we're all doing in conversations that are frustrating the other person, that's not allowing them to have a voice. So we need to understand the very specific core principles that we all have to have that ensures everyone has a voice, of how to have conversations, how to engage in other people's claims, how to look for validity, how to look for truth, how to establish truth, how to question ourselves, how to ensure we are never lying to ourselves, that we're not just doing it to make ourselves feel better because the other person was using a lot of horrible behavior to tell us the criticisms they see of our behavior or of our views, which is also terrible. They need to know that. I am not deflating or defending their positions and allowing them to display that behavior. No, that's specifically what I'm talking about. We need to rid this from our society. We need to stop this insane, terrible behaviors and list them out and have very clear, specific definitions of what they are, and then have a lot of examples, like 30 to 100 actual video examples of people displaying that behavior, so we know what it looks like. Not some mild oversimplification of what it is and one slight example. We need to be meticulous about this. We need to understand this extremely well so we can have healthy conversations about the incredibly large list of complicated topics that are all affecting every single one of us. All right, so let's watch that video. So you could already see it, and obviously these are actors and they're portraying a role, but this is how, obviously this is how we see too many conversations of really well-educated, intelligent people having conversations. How is the vast majority of the American people that didn't get those levels of education um, supposed to be able to have conversations when we're bad at this level of people that wanted to get in politics to do really good things. And of course, I know these are actors. Um, but obviously, both of them are not allowing each other to have a voice. And it seems like the man's being a little bit more of an asshole than the woman in his ego and a lack of ability to engage in her claims. And I think that, but these aren't real people having a real like they're not really having a conversation. And I know that they're acting. But anyways, let's
hub number.
Well, and of course, this is drama. This is what people are used to. This is the whole ego war thing of where they're constantly seeing drama inside of their lives, where they're having those particular squabbles in the same. This is why I think that the exact same core mechanisms of how we engage in conversations are happening in the interpersonal relationships. So they're seeing this happen inside of their lives, and this is why they like watching this stuff as well as. And then definitely there's a lot to be said on why people are tired of this and don't like watching this anymore. But let's go first for why people like to watch drama chaos like this. And I think that's exactly why the biggest reason why most people like to watch reality TV shows is because they like to see these squabbles of people fighting with each other, and it's not their fight, and then they get to then choose a side of like who they like, and they even feel like they feel under. I think we feel under attack when we feel somebody that we relate with inside of a television show is under attack as well, and then we're thinking inside ahead like whether or not the other person was right or wrong, and like there's just all of this stuff that we're building up these worldviews of how different things work in many different instances, and there's just so much to unpack there that I'm not going to continue on with this, but like back here, I mean, maybe they're being disingenuous. Maybe not all conversations between political pundits were like this. Maybe this was one rare clip between two people that were like this. But maybe it also was like this back in 1966. Let's look at 1966 on this. There's 67. It's in between here. But yeah, I mean, this is still bad. To me, my view, this is still really bad. We need to be way better than this at being able to understand any complex issue, and we need to way more overlap for agreement. When we know how to have healthy conversations, I think we will be able to better establish agreement because we will know how to do so because we'll be in the pursuit of truth and understanding how we learn that, and we're not feeling like anyone is trying to take any sort of power and control over us to not let us have a voice, and they get to then make all the decisions to manipulate us and get what they want, etc. Whoops. But yeah, let's go back to Rochester. She's making some really good points as to the moderators need to be able to moderate, but because we do not know and understand really well this ego war mechanisms and why we cannot have healthy conversations, they can't moderate. They would have to be a louder voice than the other people that are continually of those people that are frustrated. You can hear the anger and the frustration in their voice as they throughout in that one instance know that they're on television, know that they're representing, a lot of people and a lot of people that have similar views to them. And the other side is, and both sides are doing this to each other, but where both sides lack the ability to be able to engage in a huge list of their claims. And when we continually go into conversations and we're like, oh, we're in a conversation again, and the other person isn't engaged in their claims, the frustration level increases. This is where we get into I have it somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where. I know I have it in here. Actually, let's see. Escalation. Yeah. Accumulation and escalation of bad behaviors. That as many of these different variables, these negative variables continue to accumulate inside of conversations, as these people continue to have conversations, and they again lack the ability to engage in each other's claims, and we can't establish agreement. We can't then move forward to make cooperative decisions on understanding how the thing works, whatever it is. Let's say the financial system, how it works, what are all the different problems that we see and how they got there, and why they exist. What are the things that are working really well? What do we want to keep? What do we want to make sure and refine? and then what are any of the solutions that we can implement to fix any of the issues. So in all these different 4 categories, as we are so terrible at understanding and having conversations about them, those negative variables are continually accumulating inside of everyone inside of our society as everyone is constantly having conversations. I see this in my 3-year-old daughter as she's trying to understand, how her siblings are treating her, or why she's doing something that might be wrong, or how that works and how she feels bad about that. I mean, again, so much of this comes down to our emotions. In fact, I think that's the base core thing is our emotions, our ability to feel. And this is why I think this is all encompassed inside of the science of love. That even in my belief is that all logic that we ever know, anything, like any logic we want to know about any scientific field of study, anything that I've said inside of here, or anyone that's ever said it in the history of time, anyone that's ever thought, all logic is logic. So it's not logical versus illogical, but it's not supreme accurate logic. All of it doesn't mean that everyone's logic is absolutely supreme or extremely accurate. Like, there are flaws, they are missing things, but they also are saying something that probably has some validity. They are saying something, and it is still logic. It is their logic, and they're presenting that, and we need to have the ability as a society, as family units, as companies, all these different areas, to be able to, as everyone is describing their logic, to be able to go through that and unpack it and see what's right and what's wrong and how that works, to then because then we're helping each other. We're all scrutinizing each other's views to hone them down better, to make them more refined and make them stronger, to better understand why we believe anything. And we have good solid logical reasoning as more and more people have questioned our particular views on whatever it is, on how that thing works and what our views are on it. Oh yeah, I even got into. I mean, I know I talked about steelmanning a couple times, but the opposite of that is strawmanning somebody's argument, and that's just something that happens just constantly. Like, inside of, it's just one of the things that happens so often in here, in these debates. Strawmanning, and call to authority fallacies are really prevalent, high frequency. But let's see if there's I can't remember the rest of this video. I don't know. Oh man, that woman's face when she heard. I mean, that's how a lot of us feel when we hear somebody else talk and we feel that their ideas are so absurd. Just hearing the view. Like, if somebody thinks that food is just for substance, and I legitimately say food is medicine in every single way possible, we can heal ourselves, they're going to have this face on them, and their ability to be able to then engage to see if there's any validity to any of these claims, to see if food does affect and contribute to disease or health in any way, or how and to what degree that takes place. Like, they can't do that. They're already they're just against it. They think the idea, when we do this, when we consistently think, we hear ideas and we're like, no, that's really absurd, I can't believe you believe that. We're getting way worse on that, because more and more topics, again, because we're so splintered and we're purifying our echo chambers, meaning that we can't allow people to have a different opinion than us. Like, these two people couldn't be friends. And if they were friends, if this woman said something and this woman was like, whoa, and she had that, instead of displaying that on her face, she's too worried offending her, but she had that thought in her mind. This is where the base human need to be honest comes into play. And that's a negative variable that accumulates, that then she has to decide, do I try and be honest and say what I really think, or am I worried about this relationship not happening, or I am so offended that my friend thinks and believes this, I can't believe that, and then they snap and they erupt and they attack and fight them and start, like, they do this face, and then they cut them off and start attacking them. And how often we see that. Oh gosh. And obviously there's just an incredibly large you can see I've searched this before, but there's a 10-minute clip
I want to talk about, of course, is that
of Ben Affleck and Sam Harris debating radical Islam, and again, these exact same root issues that are the root issue of the ego war and the mechanisms of how that works. And you'll see here that okay, we'll watch this video. I know I said only one video, but we're at 2 hours. That's really long, and I appreciate you listening this long. And I know that I've gone off on so many different tangents, and I understand if you've had to many different points stop and restart or pause, etc. And I know that my train of thought is difficult to follow, and I apologize for that. But that's why I want to build a community where we come together and we figure these things out, and we can make these videos. Like, a lot of the information inside of this video can be broken up into like 8 or 10 different videos, and we can write scripts or outlines that help it stay like maybe one whole video. 80% of it is on base human needs for social, and then we're unpacking the base human need to be trust, and we talk about that for a long time. So all the different times that I said unpack this really well and understand that really well, that's what we do inside of those videos. And we talk about the ego war mechanisms and other things that base human needs are connected to in so many different social situations as people are trying to get those base human needs met, of intimacy and so many different types of them being well understood. So one of the videos could be, one of the videos is on that. So each video is on its own large category, and 80% of the video is on that. And hopefully those are like around 20 to 30 minutes, but then they're broken up between, 8 to 10 or however many videos of the different categories of the different topics that we, come up with. But I need help on this. Like, I guess I can do, I don't know. I don't want to do this alone. This is just way too difficult to do alone. This isn't on one person's shoulders. Anyways, we'll see here that that Ben Affleck definitely sees Sam Harris, a person he's never met before. But Sam Harris had an interview a couple times, or one that I saw afterwards, that he thinks that Ben Affleck was primed, and this is where we get to feel like we get to put people in these incredibly large camps, which is what with these labels that are not accurate, they're lies, or they're just grossly oversimplified, but calling people bigoted and racist, which is going to happen here. But like how a lot of Democrats are actually thinking and sincerely believing that most Republicans are actually racist bigots. And I want to go off on the tangent of saying that I don't think most people understand what the word bigotry is, but we'll save that for another time. We'll move on.
That you and I have been trying to make the case, I think, I have anyway, that liberals need to stand up for liberal principles. This is what I said on last week's show. Obviously, I got a lot of hate for it, but all I'm saying is that liberal principles like freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear.
So he's a Democrat, he's a liberal, he's saying people need to stand up for liberal principles, and he's being attacked by his own people because of how, and we should go back and watch that clip to see exactly how he said that. But this is a thing that's consistently happening because, again, we are becoming so splintered. We're getting into smaller and smaller groups. We can't band together behind good ideas and ideas that where we have a great deal of overlap of agreement of, freedom of speech and all and different things that he's described here, but all these different things that we think that build a really good society. That I think we should we need to expand them, and there's other principles that we need to be able to have that help us, that ensure we have healthy conversations that then help us make decisions together, cooperative decisions.
Of violence, freedom to leave a religion, equality for women, equality for minorities, including homosexuals. These are liberal principles that liberals applaud for. But then when you say in the Muslim world this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
Yeah. Well, liberals have really failed on the topic of theocracy. They'll criticize white theocracy. They'll criticize Christians. They'll still get agitated over the abortion clinic bombing that happened in 1984. But when you want to talk about the treatment of women and homosexuals and free thinkers and public intellectuals in the Muslim world, I would argue that liberals have failed us. And the crucial point of confusion, thank you.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah.
You see how like very few people clapped? Like when Bill Maher ended his talk about how right before he said anything about Islam, there was more clapping, and there was way less clapping for Sam Harris, even though he's making really good points. And this is again where we get back to the whole ego war thing of criticism and who you get to criticize. That, for example, if you criticize Israel, people will call you anti-Semitic. If you just have problems with anything that Israel is doing, you are then racist and against Jews. And this is where we get to see this whole thing of that. As soon as you criticize anybody, you are then against them. As soon as you criticize something, you are then against it. Like if you criticize the Me Too movement, like if you feel there's a lot of the Me Too movement that is really good, needed to happen, calling out a fuck ton of really terrible, despicable behavior that needs to be well understood, why it exists, why people are capable of doing it, so we can rid it from our society and never happen again. But when they say believe all women, just completely, like, we need better logical reasoning than that. A woman is making a claim that she's been sexually whatever, whatever the degree, if it's extremely mild to moderate to extremely terrible, she's making a claim about that. We need to investigate and understand and go through and sift through and try and understand what is valid and what is not. But just to believe all women, that at face value, a woman just says that this happened to her and we just believe her. I don't think anyone should have that kind of power. Any group of people should have that power over other people. We will only have chaos if we say all black people get to just say if a white person did something and the black person said that we only believe the black person and not the white person. If we take it to religion, if it's a Buddhist versus Islam, and we think Islam is the more protected class and the more hurt class, so we just only believe everyone that's Islamic, and we never believe, so we only take the side of the Islam person, or we only take the side of women, or we only take the side of black people. This is not how we build a healthy society. We need to scrutinize and go through everyone's behavior, everyone's logic, everything that anyone ever said or did, and try and gather as much information as possible to understand what happened and why, and call out all bad behavior that anyone is displaying, all women, all men, so that we can get these things out of our society instead of just constantly handing over the keys of the kingdom, giving an incredible amount of clout and power to one whole group of people, that these people are now the protected classes that we say they get to just supremely say, if they say anything, take it at face value, it is absolutely true, do not question them. Because as soon as you criticize them, you're against them, and you're horrible, and you're bad, and you're terrible. We cannot function like this. We cannot sustain like this. We cannot move forward. We cannot make any decisions together. We will crumble and fall as bad as Rome did if we do not fix this as soon as possible.
Well, I mean, the crucial point of confusion is that
and right there, watch the disgust. And this is another thing that I haven't brought up yet in the 2 hours and 9 minutes I've been talking. There's a wonderful scientist that There's a whole television show that was made about him as well. His name is Dr. Paul Ekman, and he wrote several books. One of them is called Emotions Revealed, and they talk about microexpressions. And there was a microexpression right there where...
Thank you.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crucial point of confusion is that
right there that was discussed, you can already tell that it was either disgust or contempt or both, and I'm not an expert on this yet, but this is another thing that we need to well understand that's going to help us understand and love one another when we can see the emotions that the other person is feeling. And there's a long list of these as well. We get to better understand ourselves and the other person the more we all understand what's happening and what the other person is feeling.
that we have been sold this meme of Islamophobia, where every criticism of the doctrine of Islam gets conflated with bigotry toward Muslims as people.
Right.
And that is
Exactly. Right there. That's such a big problem. We cannot criticize anything, and as soon as you do, you are against it. And the exact opposite is true if you're coming from a place of love and understanding and empathy. If you're coming from a place of ego, definitely. You are trying to criticize something, to tear it down, to make it less than it is, so that your side wins and the other side loses. We have to fucking stop this ego war as soon as possible so that we can understand all the ranges of bad behavior and logic that everyone has, as well as the ranges of good behavior and good logic. We need to go through all of this, all four quadrants, for everybody, for every group, so that we can come together and love one another. And instead of this constant, insane, horrible, drama, bickering, ego war, blame game war battles of just attacking one another and being in the conversation to win the argument.
it's intellectually ridiculous. Even it gets
So hold on, are
conflated with
you
racism.
the person who understands the officially codified doctrine of Islam? You're the interpreter of that, so you can say, well, this is...
I'm actually well educated on this topic.
I'm asking you. So
I mean,
you're
if you-
saying if I criticize you're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing. That if you're critical of something...
Well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
right.
well, no,
It really isn't.
I'm not denying.
Did you hear the right when Ben said it? The reason he said Bill Maher had to say because Ben was lying. He wasn't saying right. I agree with you when you're what you just said. When you're doing it, it isn't racist. You can see that Ben was like right.
That if you're critical of something...
Well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
right.
Well, no,
It really isn't.
I'm not denying that certain people are bigoted against Muslims as people.
Right.
And that's a
That's
problem.
big of you.
But the
And you can hear that that's big of you. Like, this is not Ben Affleck's fault that he's like this. It's not. It's not. It's not. And I know that makes people think that he doesn't take responsibility. But we're not seeing how incredibly connected we all are, and the accumulated variables and the different behaviors and the worldviews that people are continually building up throughout their life as the ego war chaos, as we're not well identifying this, and how terrible we are at conversations. Well, before Ben Affleck ever had this conversation, he's had so many other conversations with other people, and they were also displaying those same terrible behaviors. Sam Harris is very rare. You'll see how composed he is through all of this. You saw the other one. With the panel shows bickering, and obviously this is just a 5-minute, and even the little clips that we see of them going back and forth, but there's just a few here, obviously, but we can just pull up so many different panel ones. I'm sure that most of the times people are having these conversations, most of it is way close to this level of hysteria, irrational behavior, of people going back and forth and arguing with one another. Or that made me think about the irrational and hysteria thing of the point I was trying to make earlier with women, where when a person is completely under control, they don't have a voice. The only thing that can happen is irrational behavior, because they're going weeks, months, years with their voice in so many different ways not being heard. And it doesn't mean every single thing that they have to say is absolutely true. It's not. But it also isn't the exact opposite of the other extreme of that as well. And all of it's just absolutely wrong, because that's not true either. Everyone needs to have a voice. And because they don't have a voice, the irrational behavior we see is because they don't have a voice. When we see somebody in public today in 2020 snapping and just going off and being angry and yelling and showing irrational thought and irrational behavior, irrational logic, it's because, I sincerely believe it is because for thousands and thousands and thousands, I don't know, I don't even know how to pull out a number. Maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 1 million. I don't know what the number is, but so many instances inside of the person's life, if they're 20 years old, with their families and friends, of these daily interactions where they're continually not being heard, as so many people around them continually have more and more ego. As we can see, as time goes on, more and more people have more ego. Then in all of their relationships, all of them, it affects them in different ways. It's not static. It doesn't mean that the way that this guy treats him, he talks to everyone like that. But there are other people he does talk to like that when he does feel like his voice isn't being heard. And again, we're all doing this to each other because we do not know how to have healthy conversations about complicated topics. We do not understand well what ego is and how it is disallowing us from being able to see our own bad behaviors that we are both doing to each other. It's not one side is right and one side is wrong. Everybody has a great deal of validity and love and compassion and empathy, and then also a lot of hate and misery and pain and suffering and frustration and stressors and so many flaws of inability to be able to engage in the other person's claims and not allowing people around them to have a voice. So of the thing that men were doing, that husbands were doing to their wives in the 1920s, 30s, and before that, by having this incredible, horrible, authoritarian dictating control, and the women displaying irrational behavior, the reason we're seeing consistent irrational behavior happening more often is because we are all not allowing each other to have voices in more instances of when we are engaging with each other at all these different levels in our lives. Inside, I don't know if I have to list it again. I need a better way of being able to just reference, all the different areas of life. Family, friends, company, work, government. I need a better way of being able to, so I don't have to list it every time. Anyways.
Why are you so hostile about this concept?
It's gross. It's racist.
It's not. But it's so not.
It's like saying
it's so not.
You're shifty Jew.
You're not listening
Absolutely
to
not.
what we are saying.
You guys are saying if you want to be liberals, believe in liberal principles like freedom of speech, like we are endowed by our forefathers with an inalienable rights, like all men are created equal.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas.
And right there, that's straw manning. He doesn't but also there's a problem with this very specific medium of this conversation. And this is one of the things that Joe Rogan asked Bill Maher when he was on his podcast. Joe asked him, do you wish you had longer conversations? And Ben Affleck also, and all these people know that the time allotted to be able to have this conversation is a short thing. So to just put all the onus on Ben for not talking more right there and feeling like he definitely just straw man this position is a little bit disingenuous, I believe, because of the time constraint. Like if they knew that they were going to have a 3-hour conversation just on this topic alone and it was just going to be them three, there wasn't I think there's 3 other people at the fucking table. It's incredible. It's just so insane how many people they have on these shows that just don't get to have a voice, because the way that human beings converse is like I was I was joking about that one where was it? No, wait. It's right there, we're 20 hours. Like how can you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 22 people And there's some green screen thing going on here too. What the hell? Did they fake this? They faked this. Oh, they faked it. I didn't even realize that until now. It's just such a short clip, fast thing. They probably took multiple... No. Is it real?
And who could forget the time they tried out bunk tables?
No, that's fake. It was fake. Gosh dang it. I didn't see that. It was fake. But you get the idea that anyways, that one person talks while everyone else listens. And I think they have 6 people at this table. 5. They have 5 people. And so 5 is I think an okay amount, but yeah, it's just difficult. All of these topics we were trying to discuss, there's so much to say, there's so much to elaborate on, there's so many thoughts that we all have that we don't get to elaborate on and discuss, and have the other person engage in and unpack, and all these different things that probably should happen, that are different steps of having a healthy conversation, do not get to occur because one person talks. Well, even if there's a room of 200 people trying to have a conversation, one person talks while all the other 199 people listen, because that's how we have conversations. But anyway, so to the point, but I do think he was still strawmanning their position of like, oh, just liberal principles, right? Yeah, sure, liberal principles. I don't think he's being genuine right there. I think this is another thing where we get into where body language and facial expressions and tone, inflection of tone on words, and then also the way that the person is framing their argument, like what they're saying and how they're saying, what they're actually, the words that they're saying, like the actual sentence of what they're trying to say, the way that they're framing it is also showing that they're not trying to be genuine. They're only trying to somewhat, they're trying to he's trying to deflate their argument. He's trying to not give their argument legitimacy. And this is, again, a thing that the ego war does when we see the other person as an enemy. Let's watch that real quick.
Right. And that's a problem.
Big of you.
But
why are you so hostile about this?
And that's what that big of you thing is, right? When we say that, oh, that's big of you, and then Bill Maher's like, why are you being so hostile about this? And he's being hostile about this because he sees him as an enemy, thinking that his ideas are so absurd when he's trying to criticize a religion. And Ben has valid points. Ben is worried that Sam Harris is trying to say all Muslims are a particular thing, which he'll get to later on. But you can see here that Ben isn't even trying to be genuine at all in the conversation. And again, this isn't Ben's fault. This is just one instance that I sincerely believe we have all done to at least one person in our lives, if not most people in our lives, that we felt that they had an absurd idea. We couldn't believe. We think that there's no excuse for their behavior. We don't see how they can believe this thing, and we think it's absurd. And when we go to talk to them about that, we talk to them how Ben, maybe a couple levels down, like not as exaggerated as Ben is right now, the level of intensity he is, but still to this, I think we've all done this.
It's gross. It's racist.
It's not. But it's so nuts.
It's like saying
it's
those
so
stateless, shifty Jew.
You're not listening
Absolutely
to
not.
what we are saying.
You guys are saying if you want to be liberals, believe in liberal principles
Right.
like freedom of speech, like
Right.
we are endowed by our forefathers with an inalienable rights, like all men are created
No.
equal.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
Of course we do. No liberal doesn't want you to criticize bad
But
ideas.
Islam
But
at
why
this
would-
moment is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
That's just
ideas
a fact.
like
It's
blasphemy,
It is
It's an ugly thing.
apostasy.
It is.
One basic liberal.
So if there's any validity to Sam Harris's claim that Islam is the motherlode of bad ideas, Ben Affleck should want to know that. But again, he already is on the premise and that Sam Harris is his enemy and his ideas are absurd. So he's nowhere near the level of capability of being intellectually honest and actually engaging in Sam Harris's claims.
Let me
principle
unpack
of
it.
tolerance.
Let me unpack it.
But not for intolerance.
No, of course not. But the picture you're painting is, to some extent, true, but is hugely incomplete. It is certainly true that plenty of fanatics and jihadis are Muslim, but the people who are standing up to them, Malala, incredible
Malala's
Muhammad Ali
fantastic, yes.
Dadak in Iran, in prison for 9 years for speaking up for Christians. A friend that I had in Pakistan who was shot this year, Rashid Rahman, for defending people accused of apostasy.
Nick,
Or how about
But
the
no,
more than a billion
those-
people
those
who
are
aren't
Muslims too.
fanatical, who don't punch
Well, I
women,
think
who
that
just want to
that's-
go to the store,
wait a second.
sandwiches,
Wait a
pray
second.
5 times a day,
All right,
and
wait a
don't do
second.
any of the things that you're saying all Muslims
Okay,
do.
Wait a second.
wait.
Stereotyping.
I'm not saying
Wait,
all
take- wait a
Muslims
You
do
add
second.
things, and you painting the whole group religion with that same brush.
Let's get down to who has the right answer here. A billion people, you say. All these billion people don't hold any of these...
Billion 5 or something.
Don't hold these pernicious beliefs?
No,
I would.
no,
well,
no, they don't.
That's just not true, Ben. That's just not
Yeah.
true.
Can I just express
many
how I
of
think
them
it breaks
do.
down in terms
The
of
idea.
What are, you haven't even defined them.
You're trying to say that these few people, that's all the problem is, these few bad apples. The idea that someone should be killed if they leave the
That's
Islamic...
horrible. That should
Wait,
That
but
is
wait,
center
you're
of
saying
the
that the
fairway
idea that
Islam.
someone should be killed if they leave the Islamic religion is just a few bad apples?
the people who would actually believe and enact that you murder somebody if they
Yes.
leave Islam is not the majority of Muslims at all.
Okay,
Is it?
let me break this down for you. Okay,
Trafficking
we have,
in a perception of people that
as you say, we have 1.5, 1.6 billion Muslims. Now,
second biggest religion in the world, a quarter.
Well,
Ben,
of
let
the
me unpack this.
population.
Let me unpack this for you.
Please do. I've been waiting.
We have
luggage has been sitting there packed
just
up.
imagine some concentric circles here. You have at the center, you have jihadists. These are people who wake up in the morning wanting to kill apostates, wanting to die trying. They believe in paradise. They
Horrible,
believe,
bad
they believe
people
in,
that-
in,
yeah.
in martyrdom. Outside of them, we have Islamists. These are people who are just as convinced of martyrdom and paradise and wanting to foist their religion on the rest of humanity, but they want to work within the system. They're not going to blow themselves up on a bus. They want to change governments. They want to use democracy against itself. Those two circles arguably are 20% of the Muslim world. Okay, this is not the
What are you
fringe of the
basing
fringe.
that research on?
A bunch of poll results that we can talk about. So to give you one point of contact, 78% of British Muslims think that the Danish cartoonist should have been prosecuted. 78%. So I'm being conservative.
So when he's referring to the Danish cartoonist, they don't have freedom of speech over there. So a cartoonist made a joke about, I think, Mohammed or their god, and so it would be like a Christian. It would be like a Christian person making a cartoon about Jesus and making it silly or mocking something in some way, and that then offends Christians, and then Christians would say, no, you can't do that, you should be prosecuted, you should go to jail. But we have freedom of speech in this country. That can't happen. Over there, that is a liberal principle. So that's a liberal principle we have here that we want to have to keep, that freedom of the press, freedom of speech. People get to say what they want, which is because of the ego war that is going to change real soon if we don't do something. We are not going to have freedom of speech for much longer. We cannot sustain like this. Too many people are actually the people that used to Democrat. There's way too many Democrats that I consistently are seeing that are against freedom of speech. There's even a New York Times article that talks about how freedom of speech is one of our worst things. I'm not going to Google that right now, but you get the point. So
When I roll this back to 20%. But outside of that circle, you have conservative Muslims who can honestly look at ISIS and say that does not represent us, that we're horrified by that, but they hold views about human rights and about women, about homosexuals that are deeply troubling. So these are not Islamists, they're not jihadists, but they
Indeed, those views are
great
anathema to
divide.
ours.
but they also keep women and homosexuals immiserated in these cultures, and we have to empower the true reformers in the Muslim world to change it. And,
absolutely.
and lying about the link
Hold on,
between
okay,
doctrine
let Nick
and,
talk for a
and
second.
behavior is not going to do that.
A lot
But
of
the,
talk.
the great divide.
you see, Ben Affleck, he talked. Sam Harris got to talk for just a little bit. I know I've been talking for 2 hours and 30 minutes, but Sam Harris has so much to say on this particular topic, as well as so many other people of any topic we want to talk about. There's a lot to say about it. There's a lot to put on the table and unpack, and then other people need to engage it. Like, we're so bad at having conversations, and Ben Affleck's like, yeah, a lot of talking. Like, he talked for like, what, how long was it on Sam Harris? Oh my gosh, dude. He talked for like a minute and 30 seconds, and then Ben Affleck's like, oh gosh, a lot of talking. And that's just another bad behavior we see inside of the ego war, when you see the other person as an enemy and you're tired of listening to their horrible, despicable ideas that you, and when I say you, again, it's the general you, that a person doesn't have the capability of being able to even engage in. Because and so this makes me think of an example a friend told me about, where they were flying to Brazil, and the plane, they got all boarded up and they're about to leave, and they're pulling out to take off, but then they had to go back to redock because somebody had a medical emergency. And during that whole time, from the time that they heard about that to when they finally got to take off again, people were just, most of it was, she said, from her view, it was 90% complaining and being frustrated, and like 10% was empathy. And I think too many people, again, when we see bad behaviors, we want to just say, oh, those are just a bunch of shitty people. Those are just really mean people. And sure, of course, we're identifying bad behavior, but that's not coming close to understanding why and how. And how do we expect people to give empathy to a stranger when they are not getting empathy in their interpersonal relationships? Anyways, let's move on.
The Great Divide.
Oh, but I was going to say, Ben Affleck's displaying that bad behavior right there of, oh, he's talking for too long, and we're seeing bad behaviors from Ben Affleck. But that Ben Affleck, when he's having conversations with other people, when people think Ben Affleck's ideas are absurd, the same thing happens. They've done the same, like that thing, that all the behaviors Ben Affleck is doing to Sam Harris has been done to Ben so many times in his life. How the fuck is he supposed to know any different of how to have conversations? People too, I've had friends watch this and they just want to just say Ben Affleck is this and this and that, and just put all the blame and onus on Ben Affleck. But we're not seeing how we're all connected with one another and how we're building our worldviews of how we're treating one another, when we're not understanding these incredibly negative variables and how they are accumulating over time, and we're not identifying them, we're not understanding them really well, so we're not removing them from ourselves and each other. We're all continuing doing this to each other, disconnecting, causing more frustrations, and we don't get to have healthy conversations about these things. Most people are in most situations not having, if we had like a 0 to 100%, like 100% is like amazing, supreme, nothing's wrong with that conversation. It is so healthy. There's nothing wrong with it. I think most people are having conversations around the 30th and 40th percentile, that some of it's good, not all of it's bad. Both sides are definitely making some good points and doing some good behaviors and having some integrity. But there's also just a huge list of bad behaviors both of them are doing that are frustrating the other person. And as soon as they continually see that, and they continually see that their voice isn't being heard, that they're now they're now having a conversation with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their husband or their wife or their parents or their children, and the same thing's happening again. They're seeing the same thing from the same person, that, oh, they're not able to engage my claim again. Why am I even saying anything? Why am I even wasting my breath? And then, like, it's just all this negative stuff continually builds up and builds up. And then we look at one instance, like this 10-minute clip. We will look at a couple different bad behaviors of one person's displaying and saying that it's just that person's fault. They're just choosing to be that. And I don't fucking believe that's anywhere near close to the truth. It's closer to, it is absolutely not completely their fault than it is absolutely on them. And I'm not saying people don't need to take personal responsibility. We need to dissect this and understand how personal responsibility is supposed to happen. But this is difficult to do when no person is an island. A person that is an alcoholic, that has all of these relationships, that if we saw them displaying all these different, these different interactions with their interpersonal relationships, we'll see that they're not good, they're not healthy, that the reason that they're going to consistently drink is because they are feeling an incredible amount of torment and pain. And yes, they are displaying bad behaviors, but so is everybody else in their fucking life. And yes, there's different levels of intensity. But it's nowhere near simple just to blame one person for one action that they're doing, that we are affecting one another, that all these different things are piling on top of each other, and they're cascade, like they're connected to, this person does this and treats this person this way, and then they treat them back this way, and then they treat them back this way, and then they do this behavior, and then this is where we get to again see the accumulation of negative variables escalate behavior. And
is not between Islam and the rest. It's rather between the fundamentalists and the moderates in each faith.
Okay, but we're misled to think that the fundamentalists are the fringe. Okay, we have jihadists, Islamists, and conservatives.
Well, and by the way,
it depends hundreds of millions of people fit that description.
You're saying that the strongest voices are coming from those who are jihadists and extremists,
and
that represents a bigger piece of the pie than we often think is true.
There's no question.
Okay, so having said that, and even if that is true statistically or otherwise, the key thing to recognize that I don't think is part of the argument, but I think should be, is that there are voices that are oftentimes raised in opposition to these jihadists and to these extreme acts.
Look how angry Ben Affleck is. It's just, sorry. Again, I don't think this is at all Ben Affleck's fault. It's just, you can see the behavior. Like, once you start understanding these things and looking at them and seeing them, they're everywhere. I'm watching so many television shows and so much media and so much stuff. It's everywhere when people are talking. But there's a long, long list of these behaviors. A long list. There's not just like 3 things to look for.
Acts. But guess what? They don't get covered. They don't get exposed. And they're not given the same level of platform.
I'll watch this later and see if there's more that I'd ever want to put into a video, but I think that's enough. I appreciate you listening for this long. I'm sorry this is over 2.5 hours. Like I said, I want to make smaller videos, and this isn't about me. This, as much of this is about me in terms of us fixing all these problems, it's like 0.001% or more zeros. I don't exactly know, but it's not like, this is about all of us. This is about all of us today and that are going to be born tomorrow, future generations. We need to fix the system of how we have conversations and figure out the core principles that we need to have a healthy society where at every level we are making cooperative decision making, and we are understanding these complicated topics better and better and better, of our emotions and that huge list of behaviors and actions and other things that here there's just so much for us to understand that that I sincerely believe we need to well understand in order to be able to fix all of these issues that are ripping our society apart, making it to where... Anyways, I'll be done there. Thank you for listening.